a rare serpent-like creature just washed up on the beaches of California. The Japanese call it Ryugu no Tsukai, the messenger from the sea god's palace. Scientists call it an oarfish, but most people, they call it the Doomsday fish. Because every time one of these deep-sea giants appears on shore, disaster seems to follow. Earthquakes, tsunamis. In the next few minutes, you'll discover why seismologists are more concerned right now than they've been in years, reveal the bizarre connection between deep-sea fish and tectonic activity, explore the earthquake sequence that's closing in on California, and explain why the next few months could determine whether the Bay Area faces its long-overdue reckoning with the San Andreas Fault. Let's start with the creature itself, because it's genuinely one of the strangest animals on Earth. Oarfish are the longest bony fish in the world, reaching lengths up to 36 feet. They live in the mesopelagic zone, that twilight realm between 650 and 3,300 feet below the surface, where sunlight fades to nothing and pressure becomes crushing. These fish are so rarely seen alive that for centuries, sailors thought they were sea serpents. Their bodies are ribbon-flat, silver with crimson fins running the full length of their backs like a mohawk. They swim vertically through the water column, undulating like living curtains. And because they normally stay in the deep ocean, seeing one at the surface, let alone washed up on a beach, is extraordinarily rare. But here's where it gets interesting. In Japanese folklore, oarfish appearances have been linked to earthquakes for generations. The most famous case? Before the devastating 2011 Tohoku earthquake and tsunami that killed over 15,000 people, dozens of oarfish washed ashore along Japan's coast. Coincidence? Maybe. But it kept happening. Scientists have proposed a hypothesis. Oarfish might be sensitive to changes in the Earth's electromagnetic field, or to subtle shifts in seabed geology that occur before major earthquakes. These fish live right on the boundary between continental shelves and the deep ocean, exactly where tectonic stress accumulates. If there are electromagnetic pulses or pressure changes radiating through the rock before a quake, creatures living at those depths might detect them long before surface-dwelling humans notice anything unusual. Is it proven? No. But the correlation is disturbing enough that when an oarfish appeared off Monterey, California in December 2024, seismologists paid attention. Now, here's what makes this sighting even more unsettling. The fish was in pristine condition, suggesting recent death, with unusual stress markers consistent with rapid environmental changes in its habitat. And this wasn't the first. Multiple oarfish sightings along the Pacific coast over the past 18 months far exceed historical averages, possibly linked to changing ocean temperatures or increased ring of fire seismic activity. Now here is where the real concern begins, and it has nothing to do with folklore. California is currently sandwiched between two recent major earthquakes, and the pattern is ominous. To the north, a magnitude 7.0 earthquake struck near the Yukon-Alaska border in December 2024. That's a massive quake, and it triggered hundreds of aftershocks, a sign of tremendous stress release across that section of the Pacific Plate. To the south, just days later, a magnitude 6.5 earthquake hit near Acapulco, Mexico. That quake was felt across multiple states and caused significant damage. California sits directly between these two events, and historically, earthquakes often follow a progression pattern. They fill in the gaps along fault systems. Think of it like dominoes, when stress releases on one end of a tectonic boundary, and then on the other end, the middle section often adjusts to compensate. But there's another layer to this. The Acapulco earthquake had what's called an antipodal counterpart, a corresponding quake on the exact opposite side of the planet. a magnitude 5.7 earthquake struck the mid-Indian Ridge, a spreading center where the Australian and Antarctic plates are pulling apart. That might sound like a coincidence, but in seismology, antipodal earthquakes are a recognized phenomenon. When massive stress releases on one side of Earth, it can trigger adjustments on the opposite side through internal pressure waves traveling through the planet's mantle. And here's the kicker. Just recently, there was another antipodal earthquake, this time corresponding to the San Francisco Bay Area. A magnitude 5.7 struck near the African-Antarctic plate boundary. Same mechanics, a subduction zone on one side, a spreading ridge on the other, stress equalizing across the globe. And Northern California is right in the crosshairs. To understand just how unusual this pattern is, consider this. Having 3 magnitude 6.5 plus earthquakes in such geographic proximity within a few weeks is statistically rare. The Pacific Ring of Fire is always active, yes, but this kind of clustering, with clear progression patterns and antipodal connections, represents an elevated risk profile. The USGS tracks these patterns using the epidemic-type aftershock sequence model. Major earthquakes don't just release stress locally, they redistribute it along connected fault systems, potentially triggering additional quakes days or weeks later. Right now, stress redistribution from Alaska and Mexico points directly at California. But to understand why this is genuinely alarming, you need to know what the San Andreas Fault is capable of. And trust me, it's far worse than most people realize. We'll come back to that nightmare scenario in just a moment. Okay, stop for a second. I know what you're thinking. This sounds like fear-mongering. Earthquakes happen all the time. Why should I believe California is actually at risk right now? Fair question, and here's the honest answer. Earthquakes are inherently unpredictable. No seismologist will tell you they can pinpoint when or where the next big one will strike. But what we can do is identify when multiple risk factors align. And right now, they're aligning in a way that hasn't happened in decades. So let me show you exactly why Northern California, and especially the San Francisco Bay Area, might be facing the most dangerous seismic window in a generation. The San Andreas Fault is a transform boundary where the Pacific Plate and the North American Plate grind past each other at roughly 2 inches per year. That might not sound like much, but over decades and centuries, that slow grinding builds up enormous strain. Eventually, the friction can't hold and the plates suddenly lurch, releasing all that pent-up energy in seconds. The northern section of the fault, running through the San Francisco Bay Area, last ruptured in 1906. That magnitude 7.9 earthquake destroyed most of San Francisco, killed over 3,000 people, and remains one of the deadliest natural disasters in U.S. history. The ground ruptured for 296 miles, with some sections shifting up to 20 feet instantaneously. That was 119 years ago, and here's the problem. The average recurrence interval for major earthquakes on the northern San Andreas is estimated at 150 to 200 years. We're well within the window. Stress has been building for over a century, and geologists know that the fault is overdue for a major release. But it gets worse. The Hayward Fault, which runs directly beneath Oakland and Berkeley, is even more concerning. It's essentially a branch of the San Andreas system, and it ruptures more frequently, roughly every 140 years. The last major event was in 1868. We're past the average recurrence interval. A magnitude 7.0 earthquake on the Hayward Fault would be catastrophic. The USGS has modeled this scenario extensively, and the results are sobering. Thousands of deaths, tens of thousands of injuries, over 400,000 people displaced, and economic losses exceeding $200 billion. Critical infrastructure, highways, bridges, BART tunnels, water systems would suffer massive damage. The entire Bay Area would be crippled. Let me give you a sense of what that actually means on the ground. When the Loma Prieta earthquake struck in 1989, a relatively moderate magnitude 6.9, it collapsed the Cypress Street Viaduct in Oakland, killing 42 people instantly. A section of the Bay Bridge fell, Marina District buildings pancaked, and that earthquake wasn't even on the main San Andreas fault. It was on a secondary fault system. A magnitude 7.0 on the Hayward fault would release roughly 5.6 times more energy than Loma Prieta. The shaking would last longer, potentially 15 to 20 seconds of violent motion, compared to the 8 seconds in 1989. And because the Hayward Fault runs directly beneath densely populated areas, the damage would be concentrated exactly where the most people live and work. Transportation would collapse. The BART tunnel carrying 400,000 daily commuters could flood. Major highway interchanges would become impassable. Hospitals sitting on fault lines might fail just when they're needed most. So let's bring it all together. What makes this moment particularly concerning isn't any single factor. It's the convergence of multiple indicators. First, the oarfish. Yes, it's circumstantial. Yes, the mechanism isn't fully understood. But the correlation between deep-sea fish strandings and subsequent earthquakes is documented often enough to warrant attention. Second, the earthquake progression. California is caught between two recent major quakes to the north and south, and the antipodal earthquake patterns suggest global tectonic stress is equalizing in ways that historically precede additional large events. Third, the time factor. Both the San Andreas and Hayward faults are statistically overdue for major ruptures. The longer stress builds without release, the larger the eventual earthquake is likely to be. Fourth, modern infrastructure vulnerability. The Bay Area's population has exploded since 1906. Millions of people now live directly on or near major fault lines. Highways, tech campuses, residential towers, none of it was built to withstand a magnitude 7+ earthquake. Even with modern building codes, the concentration of people and critical systems means any major quake will be exponentially more destructive than historical events. Fifth, cascading failures. A major earthquake in the Bay Area wouldn't just damage buildings, it would rupture water mains, severing access to firefighting water. The exact scenario that made the 1906 disaster so deadly. It could trigger landslides in the coastal hills, dam failures in reservoirs, and liquefaction in areas built on landfill. The entire regional system could collapse in a domino effect. Does this mean an earthquake will definitely happen in the next few months? No. But it does mean that the factors aligning right now represent a higher than normal risk window, and people in Northern California should be prepared. There's one more factor worth mentioning: seasonal timing. Historically, large earthquakes in California have shown a slight statistical clustering in late winter and early spring. The hypothesis is that seasonal groundwater changes, aquifers filling with rainwater, adding weight and pressure to fault zones, might act as a final trigger when stress is already at critical levels. California just experienced one of the wettest winters on record. The aquifers are full. The ground is saturated. If stress on the faults is already near the breaking point, that additional loading could be the final push. This doesn't guarantee an earthquake, but when overdue faults, elevated regional seismic activity, antipodal stress, unusual creature behavior, and seasonal factors converge, the probability window shifts. It's like watching storm clouds gather. You can't predict lightning, but you know conditions are right. So here's what you just learned. A rare deep-sea creature washed ashore in California, the same type of fish that appeared before Japan's devastating 2011 earthquake. That alone wouldn't mean much. But when you add the recent magnitude 7.0 quake to the north, the magnitude 6.5 to the south, the antipodal earthquake patterns signaling global tectonic stress, and the fact that California's most dangerous faults are statistically overdue for major ruptures, you get a picture that's genuinely concerning. Is this a prediction? No. Earthquakes remain fundamentally unpredictable. But it is a warning based on the convergence of multiple risk factors that seismologists monitor closely. Imagine waking up one morning to your phone's emergency alert blaring. The ground begins to roll, not shake, but roll, like ocean waves passing beneath your feet. Skyscrapers sway, highways buckle, overpasses collapse. Water mains rupture, leaving entire cities without firefighting capability as gas lines ignite and flames spread through densely packed neighborhoods. BART tunnels flood. Bridges connecting the Bay Area fracture and fall. Hospitals overflow with casualties, while first responders struggle to navigate impassable roads. That's not science fiction. That's the USGS's official scenario for a magnitude 7.0 earthquake on the Hayward Fault. It's what scientists know is coming. They just don't know when. If you live in California, especially the Bay Area, now is the time to prepare. Have an earthquake kit. Know your evacuation routes. Secure heavy furniture. Make a family plan, because when the ground starts moving, you won't have time to think. If this video opened your eyes to how real the earthquake threat is, check out the videos on screen now. Click, watch, and stay curious.